Bending over to pick something up was something that I dreaded when I was in back pain. And the hip hinge is a movement pattern that we perform hundreds of times in a daily life. We ought to know how to do it properly so that we aren't causing any flares or tweaks in our lower back. I want to preface this by saying you don't have to move like a robot. A well-functioning spine can move through all ranges of motion, including especially flexion. Now, I love doing Jefferson curls and loading lumbar flexion. And if you watch my social media, I do that stuff all the time. However, in order to obtain spinal freedom, I'm speaking to you, the person who's experiencing localized back pain. And the primary movement pattern you have to learn first is the hip hinge. The dowel hip hinge. This is a great assessment tool to learn how to hinge and see what kind of range of motion you're working with while keeping proper biomechanics. These bring back a lot of memories and they never get old. I'm using a tripod here, and in the theme of being creative, you can use a broomstick, any household item that will sit on your back comfortably, and I'll show you what we're doing. This goes behind your back and it has 3 points of contact at your tailbone, your upper back, and your head. And you're gonna grab it in between the space in your neck and your lumbar spine, okay? You're just gonna bend over as much as you can while maintaining those 3 points of contact, okay? Down, 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 down. That's about all I have there. And a good test is to bring the dowel out in front of you and reach your hands below you. So that's kind of just underneath my shin. That's the range of motion I have there. We don't want to go any further, because if we do, then the hamstrings are we're going past our hamstring range of motion and we begin to load our lumbar spine. That's when we can cause a little bit of unwanted tension in the lumbar spine. That's where you could be getting a little bit of tweak here and there in your lumbar spine, okay? So the dowel hip hinge is a great exercise to learn how to hip hinge. And once you get the hang of those, I want you to do them 4 reps. In Spinal Freedom, my video course, I make you do them 20, 30 times and just get used to it. So when we start to break down the hip hinge while enforcing that natural curvature of our spine, we begin to load the primary movers of the movement, which are the hip and the glutes. So if we look at the side, the hips go back, which start with the glutes lengthening. Then as I get lower, the hamstrings are going to be lengthening, and those are going to be the limiting factor for me getting further, okay? So hamstring mobility this is the best way we're going to start, by learning the natural curvature of our spine intertwined at the same time with hamstring length. So we're going to increase our hamstring length while keeping good spinal mechanics, and that's the primary movement we want to learn for the hip hinge, bending over, and hamstring length, okay? Now, if we look at compensation patterns, if I was to bend over and then start by bending my back, compensating, that's totally okay to do, only if you're not experiencing back pain, and if it doesn't cause you pain, okay? So I'm not telling you to move like a robot and everywhere you go to hip hinge. I just want you to do a lot of it so that you understand that movement first, and it helps you solve a little bit of back pain while getting that hamstring length, okay? And then once you can perform hip hinges and your pain is getting better and your hamstring length is getting longer, we continue to hip hinge and we add load, but we can then expose ourselves to compensation patterns and spinal flexion and those things, okay? But that's getting down the road. If you're struggling with the mechanics and maintaining a neutral spine, that's all right. I've been there too. Utilizing a wall is a great place to start. So if I was to take a small step forward and try to reach my hips towards that wall, I get a good target for feedback, okay? And if I get comfortable there, I can take a smaller step forward, maintaining the natural curvature of the spine. There is the wall there, and then I come back up. Using a wall as a target is totally fine, and it's a great way to enforce the primary movers of the hip hinge. Once we accumulate some solid repetitions and gain some confidence, we can begin loading our hip hinge. A light dumbbell is where we start, and we continue to do our hip hinge just with a dumbbell in our hand. You'll see that you will gain a little bit more range of motion. You're eccentrically loading those hamstrings and glutes while enforcing that movement pattern and that natural curvature of our spine. Okay, so we're doing a light dumbbell to start is one way, and if we find that one side is a little bit imbalanced, I love the single leg deadlift. It's a single leg hip hinge. You waddle over, and then you go onto the heel, you swivel, and you begin your hip hinge. Okay, so single leg is a great way to get into work on one side of your hamstring length. Okay, I'll show you the waddle. So feet together, it goes out to the side, and then you elevate your heel. Okay, so the single leg hip hinge is a great way to load one unilateral side. The hip hinge is a very important exercise to learn how to perform correctly. It can either be a cause or contributor to lower back pain, or it can be a catalyst in understanding and awareness of what our body is doing. It requires the stabilization of our torso in coordination with the contraction of our glutes and hamstrings. So this sort of motor patterning requires a whole bunch of repetition to set the pathway from mind to muscle. And if it can be performed incorrectly, well, the hamstrings can become adaptively short. And if the hamstrings do become adaptively short during a hip hinge, then our pelvis does an anterior pelvic tuck. So that causes a whole bunch of lumbar spine loading. So if you follow the regressions and you complete a whole bunch of repetitions, you'll learn the proper biomechanics behind the hip hinge. I hope this makes sense, and this is what worked for me when I was going through back pain, and I just did a whole bunch of hip hinging, and I still do till this day, only now I use external load, I use different ranges of motions, I use different angles, and I do different sorts of variations to do my hip hinging patterns. And that's what we're gonna get to down the road, but when I was in back pain, I remember just doing the wall exercise, the wall regression, the dowel regression, and then slowly adding single leg variations and light dumbbell loading to get to the place where I can perform and live functionally well, and this is what I hope for you. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're able to, please comment, like, share this video with anyone who's going through back pain. And if you want the information on Spinal Freedom, my 28-day video course, I will leave the link in the description below. And thank you for watching. I will see you on the next one.